The entire hall seemed to breathe in a single rhythm, a rhythm that wasn't mine. Golden lights illuminated the stage, reflecting off the smiling faces of the audience, while I stood still, trying to maintain my composure. And then the announcement echoed through the speakers, firm and festive. "And the winner of this year's trophy is your brother." The crowd erupted in applause, so loud it felt like it was pushing air against my chest. There, amidst all the celebration, I felt my heart slow down, as if it no longer belonged to my body. It was at that moment that the phrase I'll never forget flashed through my mind. While everyone was applauding the trophy in my brother's hand, I was trying to swallow the lump in my throat. My brother walked confidently onto the stage. He smiled for the cameras, greeted the guests, posed for photos with my parents. And me? I remained in the corner, my hands cold and my stomach tight, trying to disguise my discomfort behind a polite smile. The people around me cast quick glances, some of pity, others of confusion, some even of satisfaction, as if the lack of recognition was deserved. Each glance seemed like a reminder, you are not the chosen one. The atmosphere was heavy, almost suffocating. The camera flashes illuminated my brother's face as if he were the star of a movie. At the same time, I felt like a shadow on screen, someone no one notices, someone no one sees. The feeling of injustice burned inside. I knew everything I had done, how much I had dedicated myself, how much I had carried on my shoulders for that night to exist. But there, in front of everyone, it seemed that my effort had no value whatsoever. And yet, amidst that inner silence that only I could hear, there was something different, a strange pang, a discomfort that wasn't just sadness, it was a warning, a premonition, as if that public humiliation was somehow the beginning of something bigger, something that no one in that auditorium could imagine, because, even without understanding, something inside me was saying, this is not over yet. From an early age, there was something about our family dynamic that I could never fully explain. It wasn't a written rule, nor something anyone said aloud. It was more of a constant feeling, a quiet atmosphere that hung over the house. My parents always had a twinkle in their eye when they talked about my brother. To them, he was the pride of the family, the son who seemed to have come into the world with a sign, hanging around his neck saying, destined for success. Every small achievement of his became a celebration. A good grade, a school award, a sports performance. Everything was a reason for celebration. Photos, hugs, and exaggerated praise. And me, I was always the responsible one, the one they could trust to solve problems, help with chores, keep the house running when things got out of control. If my brother was the showcase, I was the structure, and structures don't show up in photos. I remember so many times when I wanted to share something important, some victory of mine, some effort recognized by teachers or colleagues, but I was always met with a quick smile, a hurried, that's good, and soon after the conversation would return to him. There was no declared malice, but there was absence, an absence that hurts. Over time, I learned to handle responsibilities without expecting applause. If my mother needed help, she called me. If something went wrong in the family business, my father came looking for me. I grew up believing that this was my role, to keep everything running so that my brother could shine. And in a way, this shaped my personality. Firm, discreet, always trying not to cause problems. But inside me, even though I tried to ignore it, there was an uncomfortable feeling that I wasn't being seen, or worse, that, for them, my function was to be useful, not admired. Many would understand this feeling. Anyone who has experienced family favoritism knows how silent and cutting it can be. You learn to smile, to normalize it, to accept crumbs while watching the banquet being served to the other. And this, little by little, creates a space within us, a space where the question grows that no one admits aloud, why am I never enough? In the months leading up to the event, my life seemed to revolve around a single mission, to make the family business shine at its full potential. I arrived early, left late, reviewed reports, corrected errors, trained employees, negotiated contracts. While others took time off, I stayed. While others turned off their computers, I was still solving yet another problem. None of this was out of obligation. It was because I truly believed in what we were building. And deep down, I carried the silent hope that for the first time someone would notice. My parents knew about my efforts. They saw me tired. They saw me worried. They saw me trying to avoid mistakes that could cost me dearly. But even so, there was never that clear recognition, that simple demonstration that says, I see you. "Thank you, it was always good job, keep it up," said with the same nonchalance as someone asking for salt on the table. It was as if my dedication was merely part of what was expected, part of my invisible role. That's why when they announced the event, a spark ignited within me. It wasn't about winning a trophy. I never needed awards to validate what I did, but I thought, for a moment, that maybe that would be the day my parents would recognize something deeper, how much I contributed to keeping everything afloat. I thought that event could be an opportunity to balance the scales for a moment, not to compete with my brother, but to finally feel that my effort had a space, a legitimate place in the family. I didn't sleep well the night before, not because I was anxious about winning something, but because I wanted everything to be perfect. I was the one who had organized half of the behind-the-scenes work, confirmed, suppliers, reviewed the schedule. I wanted my parents to be proud, not of the prize, but of me. This is the part that generates empathy. Who has never wished to be seen by the person who matters most? Who has never carried the tension of waiting for something simple, human, that may never come? And there, on that thin line between duty and desire, between effort and silence, I nurtured a last spark of hope, without knowing that, a few hours later, everything would change, and in a way that no one could have predicted. The hall was filled with that swirling lighting that always appears at important events, propellers of light moving in slow circles, creating golden reflections on the walls and on the anxious faces of the audience. The music swelled, the spotlights focused on the stage, and for a moment, everyone fell silent. It was the kind of silence that you not only hear, but feel. A silence full of expectation, as if time were waiting for the next sentence to decide where to go next. And then she came, clear, animated, triumphant. "And this year's trophy goes to your brother." His name echoed through the room like a bang. The audience erupted in instant applause, so loud it seemed to shake the ground beneath my feet. People stood up, some whistled, others clapped above their heads as if celebrating the victory of a world champion. My parents exchanged proud glances, smiled, and applauded as if it were the most important moment of their lives. Meanwhile, I stood there, to the side, trying to maintain a smile that didn't reach my eyes, the kind of smile that hurts. My mouth lifted, but my chest sank. It was as if someone had squeezed my heart with both hands. My fingers went cold. My legs felt heavy. I tried to appear indifferent, but the feeling of invisibility was almost physical, like a wet cloth on my shoulders. I watched my brother walk onto the stage with the confidence of someone who had been expecting it. He held the trophy with both hands, raised it so everyone could see, while camera flashes created small bursts of light around him. My parents were called for the official photo, and I stood there in the background, unnoticed by anyone in that perfect family picture. It was at that moment that something inside me broke. The frustration, which before was just a muffled discomfort, transformed into something deeper, an emotional turning point. It wasn't jealousy, it wasn't envy, it was simply the painful realization that I would never be celebrated in the same way. It was the certainty that for them my role wasn't to shine, it was to sustain someone else's shine. And while the audience cheered, while the trophy gleamed in my brother's hands, I realized that this scene, so humiliating, would be the beginning of a change that no one there imagined. The shattered expectation wasn't in who received the award, but in what would come after, away from the cameras, away from the applause. When the ceremony ended, the hall gradually emptied, but the heavy feeling inside me seemed to increase with each step I took towards the exit. The sound of applause still echoed in my mind like a bothersome ghost, repeating the scene I wanted to forget. My parents remained excited, commenting on every detail of the trophy, the photos, the praise my brother had received. I walked beside them, but it was as if I were walking alone, not because there was a lack of people, but because there was no space for me in that joy that didn't include me. In the car, the silence was almost suffocating. My parents chatted animatedly in the front seat. My brother reviewed photos on his phone, and I looked out the window, watching the city lights blur past in colorful shadows. It was strange how that contrast, the noisy party and the quiet drive back, made everything even more painful. The emptiness inside me seemed to echo in the same rhythm as the car engine. When we got home, I went straight to my room. I closed the door slowly, as if afraid of making too much noise, and sat on the bed without turning on the light. The darkness felt welcoming, as if someone was finally offering me a space where I could be seen, even if only by the shadow I cast. There, alone, the question I'd been trying to avoid finally found a voice within me. Why is my effort never noticed? It was a simple question, but one laden with years of small disappointments, of swallowed-up moments, of silent expectations that were never fulfilled. I knew I never sought excessive attention, never needed applause to do my job. But that night, for the first time, I missed something I had always tried to hide, the desire to be recognized by the very person I most wanted to impress. My thoughts began to mingle. Childhood memories, comparisons, moments when I had been useful but not celebrated. Everything seemed to align in a painful timeline that led up to that moment in the hall. It wasn't just about the trophy. It was about everything it represented. It was in that profound silence that something began to change within me. A new kind of awareness, a realization that I could no longer live solely in the shadow of expectations that never included me. Without even knowing it, that moment of unspoken pain would be the trigger for a discovery that would change everything, even what I thought I knew about my own family. The next morning, I woke up with that strange feeling of emotional hangover. It wasn't physical exhaustion. It was as if my mind was still, stuck in the moment of the trophy presentation, reliving every detail I wanted to forget. I tried to go about my day normally, but everything seemed out of place. It was as if I were walking through a thick fog, carrying a weight that no one could see. My parents and brother seemed to continue their routines without any change, as if nothing significant had happened the night before. For them, everything was perfect. For me, something was about to crumble. That's when my cell phone rang. The number on the screen was familiar but unexpected. The family lawyer. A serious man, always direct, who only called when something truly important was at stake. I felt a chill run down my spine. I answered, my voice still hoarse and somewhat unsteady. "We need you to come to the office today. It's about the company." Those words fell upon me like a silent thunderclap. His tone wasn't casual. It wasn't politely neutral. It was urgent, precise, almost confidential. Deep in my stomach, that uneasy feeling I'd been ignoring intensified, as if my body knew something even before I understood it. "Did something happen?" I asked. There was a short pause, full of meaning. "I prefer to explain in person. Come as soon as you can." And he hung up. I stood there for a few seconds, staring intently at my phone as if it could offer more answers. The rhythm of the story shifted in that instant. Something was pulling me away from the invisible role I had always occupied. It was as if a door was opening, revealing a corridor I never knew existed. Everything inside me screamed with curiosity, apprehension, and almost contradictorily, a small hope that I was trying to stifle. As I drove to the office, each mile increased the tension. The sound of the engine seemed to match my racing thoughts. My mind replayed conversations, recent decisions, my parents' strange behavior, details that hadn't made sense before. It was as if I was about to discover something big, something that would completely change the family dynamic. What I didn't know was that this phone call would mark the beginning of the greatest revelation of my life, and nothing, absolutely nothing, would be the same after that conversation. The lawyer's office always had a heavy, almost solemn atmosphere, as if each wall held too many secrets. That day, however, it seemed even quieter. I entered and found the lawyer seated behind his mahogany desk, his glasses perched on the tip of his nose, a brown envelope, carefully positioned before him, as if it were a precious artifact. He looked up, studied me for a moment, and gestured for me to sit down. My heart was beating too fast for such a calm environment. "Thank you for coming so quickly," he began by interlacing their hands. "What happened?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He took a deep breath before continuing, like someone about to reveal something that would change the course of everything. "It's about the company. Your parents left instructions for this to be given to you after yesterday's ceremony." My stomach clenched. He pulled out the envelope, slid it toward me, and said, "I think it's best if you see for yourself." With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. Inside was a thin folder with official documents, stamps, signatures, and seals. When I turned the first page, my world stopped. There, clearly and irrefutably, was what I would never have imagined. The majority of the company's shares were transferred to my name. For a moment I couldn't breathe. It was as if the air had been ripped from the office. I read and reread the lines, searching for some mistake, some loophole that would explain what seemed impossible. But there was no mistake. It was real. I, of all people, the invisible son, the responsible one, the one who never received trophies, was now the owner of most of the company. The lawyer then explained with the calm of someone who had already anticipated my reaction, "Your parents have always trusted you with the serious business matters. They recognize your work, even if they've never shown it publicly." Those words pierced my chest like a lightning bolt. It was an unexpected, almost cruel truth. While I believed my effort went unnoticed, they were silently building something for me. It wasn't an award to show off at a party. It was something much bigger: responsibility, trust, legacy. The emotional upheaval was so intense that my eyes burned. It wasn't just surprise. It was relief, indignation, gratitude, confusion, all mixed together. The night before I had been sidelined on stage. Now I discovered that the real stage was much bigger, and it was mine. The trophy shone brightly in the photos, but the future of the family was in my hands. As I stared at those documents in the office, a mixture of shock and revelation spread through my body. It was as if each signed line, each official stamp, rearranged everything I had believed about my family up to that moment. The image from the previous night returned to my mind like a film. My brother smiling for the cameras, raising the gleaming trophy, my parents posing beside him with pride etched on their faces. That entire scene, which before had seemed a symbol of my invisibility, now took on a new meaning. The lawyer watched me intently, perhaps waiting for me to figure out on my own what those signatures really represented. Yesterday's trophy was merely symbolic, he explained it gently. Nice for photos, important for his brother's self-esteem, but without real impact. And at that moment, everything fell into place. The trophy, that shiny piece that had attracted so much attention, was just an object, an ornament, a souvenir to be placed on a shelf. But the folder I was holding, it wasn't for photos, it wasn't for applause. It was for the future, a future that had weight, responsibility, consequence. The difference was stark. While one award served to impress, the other served to build. My parents, who so often seemed to ignore my efforts, were actually deciding something much bigger behind the scenes. They didn't need an audience for that. They didn't make speeches. They didn't announce anything in front of the lights. The trust they placed in me wasn't public. It was silent, deep, thoughtful. They saw in me what I myself, because of the pain, couldn't perceive, that I was the foundation, the structure, the firm point of the family. The feeling of abandonment I had felt on stage began to transform. Slowly, like someone trying to adjust a blurry lens, I began to see the situation from another angle. Perhaps they knew that my brother needed external recognition. Perhaps they understood that he lived for validation, for applause, for fleeting moments that shine and pass. And perhaps, just perhaps, they knew that I carried another strength, a strength that didn't depend on spotlights but on character. It was hard to admit, but it made sense. That illuminated trophy wasn't the real prize of the night. The entire company, with all its risks, successes, challenges, and possibilities, had been reserved for me. What seemed like a public rejection was, in fact, a silent trust built over years. A trust that didn't need to be displayed because it was too real to fit on a stage. And there, in the middle of that silent office, I realized a profound truth. The person who receives the trophy isn't always the one who truly wins. I sat there in the office, still clutching the documents as if they were too fragile to exist. My heart felt torn between everything I had felt the night before and everything I was discovering now. The frustration that had burned inside me like an intense fire hours earlier began to give way to something completely new, a slow but powerful understanding that seemed to form layer by layer within me. It was strange. The pain was still there, but it no longer occupied all the space. It was as if the revelation had turned on a soft light in a dark room, illuminating corners I had never seen. For the first time, I began to realize that perhaps I had spent so many years looking only at the surface of things, expecting recognition in the most obvious, most immediate, most visible way, and therefore I failed to notice what was really happening behind the scenes. The phrase that echoed in my mind, as if it came from somewhere much deeper than myself, was simple, yet transformative. Sometimes the prize that shines the least is precisely the one that changes your whole life. And that made sense. My brother's trophy gleamed under the lights. It was beautiful. It drew attention. But in the end, that's all it was. Appearance, noise, appearance. The company, on the other hand, was substance. It was responsibility, legacy, future. And above all, it was trust. My parents' silent trust carried more weight than all the applause that night. As I reflected, I began to realize something even deeper. I had measured my worth by the reactions of others for so long that I forgot to measure my worth by my own actions. I allowed myself to believe that because I didn't receive flowers, I didn't plant any gardens. But there, with those papers in my hands, I realized I was wrong. I had silently built much more than I imagined. The internal shift began with a small but firm thought. I deserved to be there. I deserved that trust. I deserved that legacy. Not by chance, not by luck, but because I had sustained, carried, built, and protected that company when no one else was watching. My worth wasn't in the lack of applause the previous night, but in everything I had done behind the scenes over the years. And at that moment, a new strength took shape within me. A strength that didn't depend on trophies, photos, or stages. A strength that came from the most important recognition there is, the internal one. The certainty that, despite everything, I had value, and that this value was never small, just silent. I left the lawyer's office with slow steps, almost in slow motion, as if each movement needed time to keep up with what was happening inside me. The late afternoon sun illuminated the street, creating warm reflections on the asphalt, and for a moment I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Peace. It wasn't the peace that comes from the absence of problems, but the peace that is born when the truth finally finds space to breathe. As I walked, the scene from the previous night flashed through my mind. My brother holding the trophy, the applause, the flashes, the smiles. That image, which had previously hurt me, now seemed so small compared to what I held in my hands. It was almost ironic to realize how everything had been reversed, and it was there, amidst that contrast, that the phrase took shape within me clearer than ever. He got the shine, but I got the future. The shine fades, the shine disappears, the shine ages, scratches, fades. The trophy, however beautiful, was merely a fragile symbol, destined to gather dust on a shelf. The future, however, that had weight, it had responsibility, it had real impact. It was made of decisions, of paths, of possibilities. It was something that would last much longer than a photo at an event. And for the first time I realized that value isn't always visible. It doesn't always appear in the shop window. It isn't always applauded. It isn't always shown to the world. Sometimes, true value is hidden in silent gestures, in choices, made away from the spotlight, in decisions made with the heart, not for the audience. This understanding opened something up inside me, a new freedom, a strength that didn't come from outside, but from within. And I realized that many people experience exactly this. They are forgotten in moments of superficial brilliance, but carry a profound impact that no one sees. They are responsible, constant, firm, and precisely for that reason, they are often underestimated. That's why this story isn't just mine. It belongs to everyone who has ever felt invisible, wronged, sidelined, but who in the end discovered that they had a greater purpose prepared for them, a purpose that didn't depend on applause, but on character. And now I leave this question to resonate, not for myself, but for those who are watching. Have you ever experienced something that seemed unfair at the time, but later revealed a greater purpose? And you? Have you ever experienced something that seemed unfair at the time, but later revealed a greater purpose? Share your story in the comments. It might touch and help other people. If this video resonated with you, please like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today.